So this is my video of installing an OPMID gauge on my 2025 Dax. The first thing I'm going to do is take out these two bolts to get access to the headlight and the underside of this gauge. Once I do that, I'll bring you back. So I tried to take these two bolts out and remove the headlight bucket. I realized that there's a bracket back here that connects through the bucket. So you probably can't see that very well. Anyway, there's a bracket here. So apparently I have to take the headlight off first. So I'm going to do that. I'm assuming it's going to be these two screws and maybe this one bolt underneath. This screw, that screw, and then underneath. Of course, everything runs through this bucket, so there's a cable tie that goes through this hole, and I just loosened up to give me a little more room to work. I don't think it's worth taking the wiring harness out. Maybe if I undid these, it'd give me a little more drop. I'm going to try it as is, and then we'll go forward from there. I undid the blinkers, let those pull through, and that gave me access to this screw here, which I'm going to take out, and then that should give me access to the back of the speedometer. You take that one screw off, and there are two, sorry about the light here, there are two little nibbins that hook onto that, onto the back of the gauge, hold it in place. You just kind of pry that off, take the gauge off. There are two more screws that have to come off. So two screws, and then this plug comes undone. Okay, we can see the gauge is unplugged here. Pretty easy peasy on that. And now I'm going to get the OPMID out and see what's involved in that. All right, so here we have the OPMID. We've got the gauge, which is plug and play. Has an additional sensor wire, an additional harness pack here, a back. I'm going to figure out what the use of this is. I'll try and read through the Japanese instructions or find American instructions and see what they say. I'm going to mount the gauge first. I think it goes on the original gauge, and so that should be fairly straightforward. That'll plug into there, same weather boot, and then I have to figure out what this extra wire is for. So take the washers off these two silver screws and screw them straight through here to the bracket. Holds the back of the case on and holds the gauge in place, and then the black screw goes in this hole right here. And now we're going to move on to the supplemental wires. So on this wiring harness, what looks to be the oxygen sensor here, this plugs in. You pull that and then plug that into this kind of early adapter, and then this one goes back to into this looks to be male adapter, and then this female adapter plugs back into the O2 sensor. This looks to go to the coil. Let's pick up the RPM there, not through the regular. And then I think this wire is for if you're adding the oil temp sensor, which I have on order, but I haven't done that, so I'll just zip tie that in that general direction, and we'll go from there. So I just took the wiring harness, and here is where the coil is on the Dax. Easy access. Unplug the coil from the stock harness, plug this in to the Dax, and the wiring harness from the OPMID, and then there's a another plug in that same section of the wiring harness that you plug the stock wiring harness into. That sets that up. And now I'm going to go do the oxygen sensor on the other side of the engine. Once that's done, I'm going to find a nice routing for the wire, zip tied in place. There may be room, enough wiring harness to store the rest of the wires up in the bucket. If that's the case, then that's where I'll put them. Okay, here's the stock OT sensor. It's going to plug into the male end on the wiring harness, and then this will plug into the actual O2 sensor, and then I'm going to zip tie the wires up and see where everything can land. I've left the pigtails on here so you can see where I've put the zip ties. I'm just zip tying the temp sensor, which goes into the oil drain plug, somewhere down here out of the way. These two are together. This bundle represents the rest of that harness, kind of zip tied to an OEM harness. This is the lead run back to the headlight bucket, and so I'm going to zip tie that to the main harness that lives kind of in this canal. There's this, you can see, and I'll follow that back to the bucket, and then zip tie those wires in up here somewhere, and then see what we got after that. So what I decided to do on this, coming off of the OPMID for the auxiliary wire harness, is to just run it a circuitous route by the horn and then down by the brake lines. You see it connects right there. I'll probably do some tape on that later on, but I think that's the physical install. Now I'm going to put the bucket back, the headlight back, and then see if I can program it. This gauge is made for a lot of different Hondas, mini motos, the CT125, the Dax, and also I think the Monkey. And so it may fit the Grom. I think Grom may have its own special one, but anyway, it came with a bunch of different instructions for different models, so I just used the pictures from the Dax one, and then I'll use the parameters on the programming. I'll see if I can explain how to do that, if I can figure out how to do it. Putting the headlight is pretty much the opposite of taking it apart. Put the wires back into the bucket, blue to blue, orange to orange. Make sure you reattach the wiring harness back there, and then the 2 bolts on the side. I get the bucket stationary, and then the 2 screws and the 1 bolt underneath, and again the 10mm bolt to secure it to the bike. I'm gonna go pin that up real quick, and I'll come back after that. So headlights back in, plugged back in. Started these 2 black ones, and there's a silver one that's gonna go in the bottom here, and you just tighten all that stuff up real snuggy, and then that'll be the physical part of the install, and that'll be complete. So not a terrible install. I think it took maybe an hour and a half at the most, probably. I got to program the speedometer next, and so we'll see how that goes. On the headlight, there's a hook at the top that has to go in first, and then the 2 screws down here, and then this silver screw is really the adjustment on the headlight. It can go forward, up, or down, and so you want to kind of, before you take it apart, get a feel for where that is. Mine was luckily kind of scarred from where it had been clamped down, so I'm going to go to that same spot and clamp it down, and then I'll check how the headlight is after it gets dark. Okay, now we're going to try and program this thing and see if it works. Actually, peel the number protector gauge off. Looks like it has 2 levels there. Very nice. And now we're gonna give it power. It comes up. And now there's a instruction sheet that talks about, for the Dax, what the settings are supposed to be for each of these things. And so I'm gonna use that sheet to program this. I think the way to get into the programming mode is you hold A and B together. Okay, so 1.1 is 60, so that's good. I think to advance, 1.2, oil change mileage, and it's between 1,000 and 1,000 kilometers. So this is running in kilometers. The speed, 1.3 is 107.2. For the Dax, the front sprocket is actually a 15-tooth front sprocket, so we're changing that. The rear sprocket is a 34 tooth sprocket. So if you change your sprockets, you can adjust this and it will make up the speed. The next one is pulse. It says pulse is 24 for the Dax, so we're gonna change that to 24. All right. DIA, diameter of the tire. So if you change the diameter of the tire, and mine is 477 according to this sheet. When I change it to a different tire, I'll change this here. It's 1.7. The tacho is 7,000. And we're going to go 7,000. And I think that's the shift indicator. So they want you to shift it 7,000. If I wanted to shift it 75, which I tend to shift a little higher, I'll do that. Okay. Back to 2.1. 2.2. Oh, that's the green, and then the red is when you're supposed to. 2.1 is when you're supposed to, and that's the green. So if I want to go back in and change that to 5,500, which is what they're saying it should be, I'll just change that. We'll call that 6,000 instead of 5,500. 2.1. 2.2, 7,000 is what they're saying this number should be. And I think that's the red shift number. 2.3, and the display shifting is the range, and it's supposed to be 10,000. And we'll go up. 1.3, on tacho. Oh no, it's supposed to be 7,000. So we'll go into that one and do that. 7,000. Gauge is the next one, and that's 10,000. Type is posi. Number of ignition pulses is 0.5. 3.1. Very high temp warning is 145 degrees centigrade. All right. And they're saying this isn't used. Unit is centigrade or Fahrenheit. If we can change that to Fahrenheit. There. 4.4 is backlitness, how bright it is. 4.2 startup screen, and it's A. ABS is on. I have ABS on this unit. Setting the auto use, and it's set on kilometers. I have 71 kilometers, so 71 times 1.6 is going to be maybe 106 kilometers. Gonna be close enough for government math. Oh, 6. All right. Unit. I'm gonna go back. 12. This is 12.1 volts. That's probably my battery. If I wanted to increase it or decrease it, I'd do it there. I'm gonna go back, and then I'm gonna see if I can go back to 4.5 into unit and change that from kilometer to mile per hour. All right. I'm gonna go forward again. Voltage 5.1. Primary reduction ratio. On the Dax, it's 3.421. So 3.421. Three, 4, 2, 1. All right. And then first gear is 2.50. 2.50. Second is 1.55. Third is 1.15. Sorry, I'm drooping a little bit on my camera there. Mm-mm. 1.15. Fourth is 0.923. Fifth, I don't have, so I don't know if we non. Yep. Sixth, non-display. That you can display your ratio, I guess, if you want to. I'm going to turn that off. And then cut is 0. We're going to leave that where it's at. Fuel display resistance. I think it's 11. So that's complete. And so that's complete. All right. To change the clock time, you press that. If I want to change the time, just go here and do that. I don't know what time it is right now, but I'll come back to that. Anyway, let's start it up. It is in neutral. Look it up, it doesn't show gear I'm in, but anyway, neutral. A little slow start, but it has my mileage, 66, so I was a little off on my translation there. And we'll go from there. We'll go through and check all my connections, make sure everything's connected up right, and go from there. Thanks. Okay, I do have a check engine light on, which I'm not exactly sure what that's about. I'll have to do some reading and see if I can figure that out. I am sending my ECU off to be flashed for a big bore kit and a camshaft, and so I'm going to do that, pull that ECU, and then when I get back to town next week, I will try and install that.